Namaste and welcome to everyone joining us today, the 28th of May, 2026. My name is Sanjay Kucheria, and on behalf of the Sanatan Dharma Group, I warmly welcome all of you to today's session. Our effort through these dialogues is to explore Indian knowledge traditions as living and practical frameworks that offer deep insight into human life, leadership, and collective well-being. Before we begin, a quick note on housekeeping. This session is being recorded. Today's session will be presentation-based, followed by a Q&A toward the end. Please type your questions in the Q&A box of the Zoom app as the session progresses, and we will take them up during the discussion segment. Today's session is titled Dharma, Leadership, and Health, or I should say Dharma, Health, and Leadership. Modern conversations on leadership often focus on performance, efficiency, and external achievement. Similarly, health is frequently reduced to the management of physical symptoms of stress. Indian knowledge traditions, however, have historically approached both health and leadership through a broader and more integrated lens, one that connects the individual, society, ethics, environment, and inner balance through the idea of dharma. This session invites us to explore how the Indian understanding of health is not merely medical, but civilizational, and how leadership, when disconnected from dharma, can lead to institutional imbalance as well as to personal and societal disease. It is an honor to have with us Dr. P. Rammanohar. Dr. Rammanohar is a distinguished scholar and practitioner of Ayurveda, widely respected for his work in bridging classical Indian medical knowledge with contemporary research and practice. He serves as the director of the Amrita School of Ayurveda and has contributed extensively to the fields of Ayurveda, Indian philosophy, public health, and knowledge systems. His work combines rigorous textual scholarship with practical engagement, making complex traditional ideas accessible and relevant to contemporary audiences. Through his research, teaching, and institutional leadership, he has consistently emphasized the importance of approaching health as the cultivation of balance, responsibility, and right living. Dr. Ram Manoharji, thank you for being with us today. Namaste. We invite you to take us through your presentation and share your insights on the relationship between dharma, health, and leadership. Over to you.
Namaste, and thank you very much, Sanjayji. It's an honor and pleasure to share my views on this platform. And today we are going to look at Ayurveda, from the point of view of dharma and leadership, especially how in India we imagined health as the foundation for dharmic life and leadership for the unfoldment of the human potential to its fulfillment. So I'll just take a moment to share the slides for today's discussion. Yes, I hope the slide is visible.
Yes, it is.
Yes. So then that's the topic for today: Dharma, Health, and Leadership, an Ayurvedic lens on purpose, performance, and well-being. So in Ayurveda, health is the means to achieve something higher. So Ayurveda presents health as a foundation for purposeful action, ethical leadership, and sustainable performance. That's what makes India also unique as a civilization, this emphasis on health as the foundation for human activity, for the flowering of human activity. Now, dharma aligns personal values, responsibilities, and social contribution. So, dharma and health are, interaligned. In fact, the celebrated Ayurvedic texts like the Charaka Samhita or the Ashtanga Hridayam, at the very outset, they say that Sukhartha Sarva Bhutanam Mata Sarva Pravartaya Sukham Chana Vina Dharmad Tasmad Dharma Paro Bhavet. So, this emphasis on Dharma is something with which we open, the discussions in the Ayurvedic texts. So, the sloka that I just chanted points out that, you know, the whole of creation is doing actions to obtain sukha or well being. And sukha does not come or it does not, manifest in a sustainable manner until our lives are based on dharma. So, tasmad dharma paro bhavet. Therefore, the focus of life is to be established in what is called dharma. So it is on the foundation of dharma that in the Indian civilization we have envisaged leadership. Because leadership without inner balance leads to burnout, instability, and poor judgment. And so Ayurveda integrates physical vitality, mental steadiness, emotional resilience, and spiritual clarity. So we can say that India represents a civilizational health intelligence, which in Sanskrit is understood by the term Arogya Samskriti, and it is actually a civilizational framework for cultivating health oriented cultures and institutions. So, on the foundation of health, we build dharma, and on the foundation of dharma emerges ethical leadership that sustains society. So, today, what we are hoping to achieve in the short time that we have is that we will explore and understand to some extent the Ayurvedic framing of the relationship between dharma, health, and leadership. And we will also explore the multidimensional framework of Arogya Samskriti, or how we have envisaged, a healthy civilization in the Indian tradition. And especially, we will recognize the role of mental balance, agni, and sattva in performance and resilience, and how actually health and dharma lays the foundation for empowering leadership. So, health oriented cultures can actually truly support sustainable leadership. And finally, we'll also explore on how Ayurvedic principles can reduce burnout and enhance ethical decision making. So, with this background, we will now dive into the topic for our discussion today. So, the theme in Ayurveda is that when we live our dharma, we protect our health. And when we are healthy, we can lead with clarity, compassion, and courage. So, again, in the classical Ayurvedic texts, we have this basic statement that dharmartha kama mokshanam arogyam moolamuttamam. That for the fulfillment of all human aspiration, arogya or health is the foundation. Without health, we cannot execute our duties. And so, in India, we had a system, a culture, a way of living in which health was prioritized. Because through health, we perform. When we have health, we are more productive. And so it was very, very important that our occupations, whatever we do for success in life, it does not destroy our health. We have to reconcile our aspirations with our efforts to preserve health. So health became the vital foundation, physical, mental, emotional and spiritual well-being, which enables us to live and serve. So health actually provides capacity, physical strength, mental clarity, emotional balance, as well as spiritual resilience. And when we have that foundation of health, dharma gives the direction. No, dharma actually means a deep understanding of the nature of things. The Charaka Samhita says why we fail in our endeavors is that, again, there's a variant of the shloka that I mentioned earlier. Sukhartha sarva bhutana mata sarva pravartaya. Jnana jnana visheshatu marga marga pravartaya. Though everyone aspires to achieve well-being and prosperity, due to lack of knowledge, jnana and ajnana, we choose the wrong path sometimes and then end up in misery or long-term negative outcomes. So dharma is basically aligning our actions with the larger scheme of things in the universe. It actually means being able to take an informed decision that is also ethically sound, spiritually oriented, and sustainable in the long run. And that is why the word dharma is called as, dharayati, that which sustains. So dharma helps us to discern from right and wrong. It aligns words, thoughts, and actions and creates meaning, focus, and fulfillment. So dharma in one way is informed decision making, but with deep ethical awareness, with deep understanding of, the cosmic order of things, with a focus on preserving the larger harmony of society, of earth and the universe. And when we have health and dharma, then emerges true leadership. The leadership that creates impact. Leadership that inspires trust and collaboration. Leadership that is capable of making ethical decisions for greater good. And leadership that can build a better, more just and sustainable world. So when dharma guides us, we live with integrity, we act with compassion, we stay grounded in purpose, we create harmony in self and society, and then three teams thrive, communities prosper, trust deepens, and legacy becomes meaningful. So this is the framework in which we are going to explore how Ayurveda helped to nurture a civilizational health framework that is aligned to dharma and ethical leadership. So, Ayurveda is not merely a medical system, it's a framework for healthy living and social organization. In fact, the word Ayurveda does not mean medicine, it means knowledge of life. And that's why it encompasses, it goes beyond health into dharma, and leadership and purposeful living. In fact, if you look at all the medical systems in the world, healthcare systems, they are all known by the place where they originated, and they have, the word medicine. So we have Chinese medicine, Western medicine, African medicine, European medicine, complementary and alternative medicine. Many of these systems are known by the place where they originated. But in India, we never called Ayurveda as Indian medicine or Indian healthcare system. We called Ayurveda as knowledge of life. It's universal. It's relevant for any person on this planet. The word Sanskrit is also similar. Most of the languages are known by the place where they are spoken. Germany, German, France, French, India, Hindustani, Tamil Nadu, Tamil, Karnataka, Kannada. But Sanskritam just means a refined speech. So this shows that, Ayurveda, all these systems evolved with a universal outlook. And health was viewed across ecological, biological, behavioral, psychological, spiritual, and societal dimensions. So the goal has been the preservation of health, swasthasya swasthya rakshanam, even before treatment of disease. Individual well-being was considered inseparable from collective and environmental well-being. And actually, the framework of Arogya Samskriti integrates health into culture, values, education, and lifestyle. So that is how India, at one point of time, I prefer to use the word Bharata, evolved into Arogya Samskriti, or you know, health oriented civilization. And we can see this. The word Bharata in Sanskrit also means those who are engaged in the pursuit of knowledge. Bha means light, Rata means to be engaged in. So the people of this land at one point of time pictured themselves as, people committed to the pursuit of knowledge. And it is in this knowledge oriented framework that Ayurveda emerged as the knowledge of life, nurturing health and integrating it with all, domains of human activity. So if you look at Arogya Samskriti, it is quite comprehensive. And we need ethical leadership to rediscover not only India, but the whole world, as Arogya Samskriti, or human endeavor that, nurtures and develops civilizational health intelligence. So the Arogya Samskriti was envisaged through multiple domains. So we have the ecological domain, the biological domain, the individual domain, behavioral domain, societal domain, epistemic domain, and everything focused on localized primary health care. So the core idea that we learn from Ayurveda is that health is not an isolated biomedical state, but it is a culturally cultivated way of life, integrating body, mind, society, and environment. So health is a cultural product. I mean, that is the key message that we get from the Ayurvedic narrative. So here is an illustration of these various domains of Arogya Samskriti and how Arogya Swasthya became the foundation for Dharma, Artha and Kama, and Moksha, enabling human beings to find, the ultimate fulfillment in life. So the ecological domain resonates with emerging themes of planetary and environmental health. The biological domain focuses on plant health and animal health, Vriksha Ayurveda, Pashu Ayurveda, and this covers the whole continuum of life. And today we have emerging ideas like One Health. And in the individual domain, we focused on physical health, mental health, and spiritual health. And then we had the behavioral domain, which focused on healthy lifestyle, healthy diet, and nutrition. In the societal domain, there was a focus on ethics and social conduct, what is called in Sanskrit as achara and sadvrita, and then universal well-being and public good, bahujana sukhaya, bahujana hitaya, extending the benefit for the maximum number of people. And here we have the mantras in Sanskrit, which, really symbolizes this great ideal of universal well-being and universal good through themes like Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Let everybody in the world achieve well-being and happiness. Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina. Sarve Santum Niramaya. May everyone attain well-being and, freedom from disease. And all this rests on this epistemic domain, where the whole idea is that the driver of this civilizational health focused human activity is what is called as health intelligence or arogya buddhi. So here we have an entire civilization that was focused on nurturing health individual intelligence, arogya buddhi. So if we want arogya or if we want health, we need health intelligence first. And it is through Arogya Buddhi that health oriented culture or Arogya Samskriti was nurtured. And we can see here all these domains are embedded in the framework of localized primary healthcare, what we would call as desha based therapeutics. And here it means that, health is something which manifests when we harmonize with our immediate environment and surroundings. And that is why in India we have so much of local diversity. Even our healthcare traditions are extremely diverse. The theme in Ayurveda is regional, seasonal, and personal. Healthcare is administered through these three layers of regionality, seasonality, and individuality. We'll explore this in a little bit more detail. So when we come to the ecological domain, if we are to call a civilization as an Arogya Samskriti, then there is first and foremost a great emphasis on planetary and environmental health. When an Ayurveda student studies Ayurveda or the medical subjects, we don't start by dissecting a dead body. We start the study of Ayurveda through a subject called Srishti Shariram. Srishti Shariram means how the macrocosm emerged from the macrocosm. Srishti, how the creation has happened. We are taught that the individual human being manifested from the whole universe. The whole universe has participated in the creation of the microcosm. And this makes us sensitive and aware of the importance of planetary and environmental health. So Ayurveda recognized ecological disruption through the concept of Janapadodvamsa. So many thousands of years ago, Ayurvedic texts discussed about the damage that happens to land, water, air, and climate. In fact, Charaka Samhita talks about climate change, Kaladushti, food systems, and public health. Ecological degradation contributes to epidemic stress and collective disease burden. We need sustainable living and environmental stewardship. So leadership requires ecological consciousness and long-term thinking. This is the primary theme in Ayurveda. So we don't start with anatomy and physiology. We start with ecology, ecological health, which is a fundamental foundation for health. So the leadership insight that we gain from ecological domain is that unsustainable organizational cultures resemble ecological imbalance. Both ultimately collapse under excess exploitation. So this is how Ayurveda invites us to the journey of discovery of our health. And once we look at the broad, so there is a statement in Charaka Samhita that Purushoyam Loka Samhita. This individual is an epitome of the universe. And then we see how the embryo develops, becomes a fully developed human being, and then how we progress through various stages of life, and then we die. And then at that point, when the human being dies, we are introduced to the dead body and we do a dissection. So we see the whole cycle of life. In the biological domain, focuses on plant and animal health, Vriksha Ayurveda, health of plants, medicinal flora, agriculture and biodiversity, food systems and medicinal ecosystems. Pashu Ayurveda, animal health and human health are interdependent. And we can see here the early foundations of the modern idea of One Health approach. So the key insight that we get here is that healthy ecosystems alone can sustain healthy societies, institutions, and economies. It is then after getting a deep insight into the ecological and the biological domains of health that Ayurveda introduces us to individual domain, where equal importance is given to the physical, mental, and spiritual dimensions of our well-being. So a key focus of Ayurveda is preservation of vitality, urjaskara. How can we enhance our capacity? In one way, we can say that Ayurveda is the secret of working less and achieving more. Ayurveda points out that if we are completely, vitalized, then we can achieve more in life. So instead of, toiling hard, trying to meet deadlines and exhausting ourselves and burning out, Ayurveda points out that it is really worth to spend some time investing on enhancing our vitality. And then without burning out, without, working like donkeys, without doing that, fruitless labor, we can actually achieve more. Not only do we enhance our longevity and our pursuits become more sustainable, because today we can see that our lifespan is cut short because of all this stress and focus on performance at the cost of our health. So the goal of Ayurveda was prevention of akala mrityu, or untimely death or premature decline. So the whole focus is on sustainable performance, which brings balance, recovery, nourishment, and disciplined living. So this is how Ayurveda envisages physical health. High performance without recovery leads to depletion of physical and cognitive reserves. So in Ayurveda, we say the three sub-pillars of life: sleep, food, and activity. We need to, balance these three. Recovery, revitalization is essential for performance. And we are not losing time by investing on health, but we are actually enhancing our capabilities and increasing our productivity in the long run. Mental health is sukha and swasthya. Ayurveda defines health as a state of sukha, inner contentment and balance. And swasthya means being established in oneself. So mental instability disrupts perception, judgment, behavior, and actually drains us out of our energy. So emotional resilience and self-regulation, especially needed for performance in high-pressure situations, and these are essential leadership qualities. There is a classical insight which says, Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayo. The mind itself is a cause for bondage and liberation. And it is clarity of mind that determines clarity of leadership. And sukha, happiness, actually in Sanskrit means being in the good space, being in that space in which you are able to function to your maximum in the most optimal manner. So mental health means to discover that space in which you become truly unfold your inner potential. And that's how Ayurveda looks at mental health. And then we have individual domain or spiritual health, sattva and inner alignment. Spiritual health in Ayurveda refers to inner stability, awareness, value alignment. And we point out that we can alter our consciousness, we can elevate our awareness to a higher level, which is called as sattva. Sattva means the essence of being, where you have that deep inner connection. And it is here that we are able to connect to values. So leadership disconnected from values can create stress and fragmentation. And it is in this domain of spiritual health that we experience the interconnectedness of nature, of all life. And Dharma actually emerges from this experience of interconnectedness. Dharma provides meaning, direction, and ethical orientation because we begin to experience the oneness of the universe. It is that true Dharma emerges only from this deep experience. So cultivating the domain of spiritual health is extremely important for establishing ourselves, in the foundations of Dharma. And Dharma makes leadership purpose-driven, not ambition-driven. It becomes purpose-driven because it is inspired by this experience of the interconnectedness, oneness, and the depth of our conscious experience. And then in health, Ayurveda looks at the behavioral domain, and all these domains were nurtured together through a civilizational process. We can see in India that a lot of health information is available, not just in the classical Ayurvedic text, but the entire Sanskrit literature. Some of the deep advices on health is found in Mahabharata, for example, which talks about fasting, healthy food, dieting. There is a book, Purana, Skanda Purana, which is giving an advice on sleep. Diva tatkarma kurvida yena ratrau sukham swapet. It's a very deep understanding of how we can get good sleep. The Skanda Purana says, what do during the daytime what will enable you to sleep soundly at night. So here there is a deep understanding of how we conduct ourselves during the day, how we align to the circadian rhythms of nature, and how that influences sleep. So a lot of deep insights into sleep, into diet, into healthy living, we found in the larger, sources of non-Ayurvedic Sanskrit literature, which clearly shows how in India, through a civilizational process, health was nurtured in all these domains. So we have dinacharya, daily routine, ritucharya, seasonal adaptation, sadvritta or ethical and disciplined conduct, diet, how food influences body, mind, energy, and cognition, how strong agni can support vitality, clarity, and resilience, and how irregular habits weaken physical and psychological stability. And the deep insight that we get here is that daily habits determine long term performance capacity. Ayurveda deeply tells us that the actions that we do at different times of the day have a deep impact on how we align with the circadian rhythms. The moment we have our breakfast, our internal clock gets set. And that act will actually determine when we will fall asleep and how well we will be able to sleep. In the societal domain, Ayurveda embraces ethics, social conduct, and collective well being. And Ayurveda emphasizes ethical conduct or achara. This was called as achara and healthy social relationships. Now, what Ayurveda is trying to point out here is that human needs, just like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, our needs evolve. When we achieve a lower goal, we have the aspiration for a higher goal. And the classical Ayurvedic texts tell us that what we call a sadvrittam, it's very difficult to translate. It's not just ethical conduct. It's, the right way of living, sadvrittam, which ensures, so you must live or we must live our life in such a way that we get 5 of our aspirations fulfilled, one after the other. What are they? Ayur, Arogyam, Aishwaryam, Yashaha, Lokamsha, Shashwata. Our first goal, of course, is to be alive. That is called Ayu. So most of us work so that we just sustain our life. Once we ensure that we are alive, the next thing we want is that we want to be healthy so that we can live long. So after Ayus comes Arogyam. Ayur, Arogyam. So life insurance and health insurance. We want an assurance that we will live long enough and that we will live with health. Once we have both Ayus and Arogyam, then we need Aishwaryam or the resources to make our life meaningful. And once we have Aishwaryam, we need fulfillment, yashaha, recognition. We need to be able to act in society in such a way that makes us feel that our life is worthwhile. And that brings us to the pinnacle of achievement in life. And then we are seeking what is called as permanence or shashwatam lokam, because all that we achieved, they are all momentary and they are bound to get destroyed. So this is a kind of hierarchical psychological need of the human being. We want to preserve ourselves, we want to keep us healthy, we want to accumulate resources with which we can get higher fulfillment, and then we seek permanence. And in Ayurveda, this the conduct that we have to engage with at the societal level is called achara, which enables to achieve all these five goals. And we had temple traditions, which historically functioned as centers of health culture, food distribution, emotional support, rituals, ecology, and community integration. So, healthy institutions require ethical culture, trust, and social cohesion. And here I would like to touch upon the role of temple. It's not just a place of worship. Ayurveda was deeply associated with the temple culture. The temple is actually a model of the human being. The Indian temple traditions employ a profound health philosophy, integrating body, mind, and consciousness as well as environment and society. Idam shariram kaunteya kshetramitya vidhiyate. This is a verse from the Gita, which says that our body itself is the temple. Idam shariram kaunteya kshetramitya vidhiyate. Kshetra is a Sanskrit word for temple. So the temple architecture symbolically corresponds to the three dimensions of existence. We have the sthula sharira, or the gross physical body, which is the outer circle of the temple, and then the sukshma sharira, or the subtle mental or emotional body, and then the karana sharira, which is the causal and spiritual dimension. So the whole idea of a temple was to create that space in which we can have a meeting with our own self. So the journey into a temple mirrors an inward journey into one's own being. And when we enter into the sanctum sanctorum, we actually close our eyes and look inside. So movement from the outer precincts towards the Garbhagriha symbolizes transition from sensory engagement towards inner stillness and self-awareness. The rituals, mantra, sound, light, fragrance, fasting, all these rituals silence and regulate our sensory experiences so that our mind can be drawn inward. So, historically, temple spaces functioned as centers of emotional support, ethical culture, social cohesion. But the core idea was that it was a place for self reflection, for initiating that journey into our own being. And the temple traditions also contributed to Arogya Samskriti by creating this grounding, cultivating mental equilibrium, discipline, collective harmony, spiritual resiliences. And in many temples in India, are linked to actual health traditions, also health practices, including, treatment and medicines. So true leadership begins with inner alignment, and entering the temple symbolically represents entering one's own consciousness with clarity, humility, and balance. So this is an image of the temple traditions. See the outer prakara or gopura. It represents engagement with the world, senses, and diversity. The mandapa is the space of learning, community, rituals, and culture. The antarala is the transition zone. As you turn inward, as you go deeper into the temple structure, you turn inward. And in the garbhagriha, it's the innermost sanctum sanctorum, where you meet your own inner consciousness. So the temple practices like sound, light, fragrance, food, movement, silence, all these things are aimed to nurture a physical, mental, and spiritual health. So the temple is a representation of the human being. Gross, subtle, causal body. The temple has these three layers. And the inner journey into the temple is from outward to inward, from activity to awareness, from distraction to focus, from restlessness to peace. from ego to self, from illness to wellness to stillness. This is the journey of going to a temple. And when we do with this with awareness, we are able to deepen that grounding in our own inner being. And from here, we can, easily nurture health, dharma, and leadership. Now, if you come to the epistemic domain, this is a very interesting term that is there in Ayurveda, that what we need is arogya buddhi. And arogya buddhi nurturing arogya samskriti. When I was a student of Ayurveda, I was, impressed by the WHO slogan, health for all by 2000 AD. But come 2000 AD and we had a pandemic, the AIDS. The WHO also changed its slogan to universal health care for all. Because health is not something that can be packaged. You cannot make everybody healthy by 2000 AD because health cannot be packaged into a bottle and distributed. So WHO became wiser. And the new slogan is universal health care for all. But 28 later, we have another pandemic and not universal health care, the COVID. And countries with access to the best health care suffered the most. If you were to redefine this slogan with some inspiration from Ayurveda, then the slogan for the future would be Arogya Buddhi for all, health intelligence for all, not health for all, not just universal health coverage for all, but health intelligence for all. It is only by nurturing health intelligence that we can civilizationally create a healthy society. Endow people with the capacity to choose health promoting behaviors. So Arogya Samskriti is a culture organized around sustaining health and well-being. Not a society, not a healthcare system, not a medical system that thrives on suffering and disease. I'm not being overtly critical here, but the fact is that today, the entire medical industry, the healthcare industry, sustains on disease. Once I remember having attended a conference where there was a discussion that cancer is the next biggest opportunity. I was appalled. I mean, how can you think of a disease as an opportunity for business? And that too, a disease like cancer. So health becomes embedded. We were anticipating, we were aspiring for, creating health in society. I'm reminded of an old Chinese tradition where the physician would be paid only if people were healthy. Actually, their salaries would be cut if somebody became sick. In Kerala, even 3-4 decades ago, we had a system where the basic needs of a physician were taken care of by society, and they did not have to depend on a patient for their survival. And I've actually witnessed and filmed some of these Vaidyas who are available for offering medical treatment at no cost when somebody becomes sick, because their needs are not met through the services that they offer to the sick, but they're taken care of. They are always available. So this focus on health, that is the key thing which we have to actually nurture, what is called health intelligence. So institutional culture determines whether people thrive or burn out. We need to empower people with arogya buddhi or health intelligence. And in Ayurveda, we had desha-based health intelligence. There is a famous verse from the classical text which says, Yasmin deshe tu yujata tajjam tasya aushadham hidam. So the plants that grow in a region or the resources that grow in a region are beneficial to the people of that region. Some of the biggest problems of modern society is that we are packaging foods and everything has become universal. Our diets are becoming more and more standardized. We are losing that flavor of regionalism or local application. And this is also leading to unhealthy practices by ultra processing of food, using preservatives so that food can be transported and will survive and reach, while this kind of distribution of resources cannot be completely avoided, I think there's still a lot of relevance for nurturing and encouraging regionalized practices, decentralized and context sensitive healthcare system, community self reliance and preventive healthcare, sustainability through ecological alignment. In India, there is a place called Ladakh, which is high up, in altitude where you struggle to get oxygen in the air that you breathe. They have milk from yak, and the water is very hard. But nature has provided almost all the solutions for the challenges that the people there face. Ephedra, a plant, grows there, and the people in high altitudes drink ephedra tree tea, which actually helps their lungs to dilate. It is a bronchodilator. They use soya, which has lecithin, which can thin the fat in the milk of the yak. And they are prone to getting kidney stones, and they use amaranthus species, which prevent the formation of these stones. So we can see how in many, many places the ecology and the life there have a deep symbiotic relationship. And localized solutions, that's a key insight here, are often more resilient than centralized dependency. So Ayurvedic healthcare was basically focused on making it localized. So in this modern world, Ayurveda comes with the theme not of globalization, but global localization. The Ayurvedic principles, that is why Ayurveda called itself as Ayurveda. These principles are applicable everywhere. So when we want to export Ayurveda from India, it's not just the medicines or the food. Somebody living in America, if they eat dal and chawal, it doesn't mean that they are following Ayurveda, because that is not suited for that climate or that way of life. Ayurveda becomes globally localized when its principles are applied according to the requirements. The herb was Ephedra vulgaris. From this, actually, a chemical called ephedrine is isolated in modern medicine also for a bronchodilator. But when you isolate it, it becomes a bit toxic. Whereas a herbal tea, it's a simple infusion. So, Dharma and leadership, Ayurveda is talking about purpose and responsibility. Dharma aligns action with values and responsibility, and leadership without dharma becomes exploitative and unstable. So the idea is that when we nurture health, and when we nurture health at the physical, mental, and spiritual level, and when we nurture health as an unfolding with, this awareness of planetary health, biological health, individual health, societal health, when all these dimensions are brought in together, our mind flowers. When we get deeply established in that spiritual domain of health, Dharma naturally awakens in us. And that's how Ayurveda envisages healthy living. I mean, health is not just the absence of disease. It's not just removing some symptoms and making you cured of a disease. Health is an unfolding of our inner being. And when that unfolding happens, Ayur Arogya Saukhi. Ayus, that is the blessing, that we used to give in our old culture. May you be blessed with Ayur Arogya and Saukhya. Ayus, that is lifespan, Arogya, health span, and Saukhyam, that mental well-being and grounding, from which actually the seed of Dharma sprouts. And when that seed of Dharma sprouts, we become true leaders. Purpose sustains resilience during stress and uncertainty. Ethical clarity improves decision making and social trust, and we'll be able to create sustainable societies, sustainable ways of living. So, sustainable leadership requires alignment between purpose, values, and action. So, Ayurveda offers us a way of living that nurtures health, in all its aspects in a multidimensional way. And that healthy state of mind, because for dharma to emerge in our mind, we need a certain level of mental and spiritual well being. So, it is from that deep peace, deep sense of purpose, deep grounding in a higher consciousness that we can truly express dharma. And so in Ayurveda, we have beautiful symbols like agni, energy, and performance. Agni is a transformative intelligence. When we, are in harmony with nature, we are literally burning. We are transforming the resources around us into the energy of action. Agni supports energy, clarity, adaptability, and resilience. Everything gets recycled. This is the idea of recycling and sustainability. When your Agni is strong, and the Vedic tradition begins with an offering to Agni. Agni mele purohitam yajnasya devam ritvijam. Let everything burn and transform, and everything gets recycled. There is a complete transformation. And in Ayurveda, that is why we consider disease as a break, as a stop in this transformation. Disturbed Agni contributes to fatigue. At an individual level, it manifests as disease. At a, ecological, environmental level, it leads to stagnation and imbalances in nature. So lifestyle, sleep, diet, stress, it affects Agni at the physical level, and it also affects Agni, at the environmental level. So performance is not merely output. Agni is that capacity, adaptive capacity, which we have to kindle. And this is why this idea of, the fire offering or the fire worship emerged in India. It's a symbol that let that fire of transformation always be ablaze. Let whatever we offer into that fire get completely transformed, recycled, and express, as the highest energy for human development, growth, and fulfillment of our highest aspirations. And ethical leadership comes from the sattvic state of the mind. And that is why Ayurvedic definition of health included, the mind being elevated to a sattvic state. If we do not work on our mind, if we do not work on a spiritual dimension of our health, we cannot really establish ethical leadership. Sattva promotes clarity, compassion, steadiness, and self-control. And excess, rajas, agitation of the mind, tamas, inertia, these things are overcome when we achieve that higher, deeper mental and spiritual health. So balanced leadership requires cultivation of sattva. So we need not just physical health and not just, a basic functionality of the mind. We need to awaken the higher capacities of our mind. We need to elevate ourselves to a higher level of consciousness. And that is what truly helps the manifestation of Dharma. So ethical leadership depends on mental equilibrium, not merely technical competence. So in Ayurveda, we offer a kind of way of life that can prevent burnout by avoiding excess stimulation, constant engagement, which eventually leads to loss of purpose and meaning in our haste to achieve so many things in a short time. We sometimes, destroy, most of the times, in fact, we destroy our health, we create mental imbalance, and we slip from that path of Dharma. So irregular lifestyle, sleep disruption, emotional overload, and poor self-regulation. So Ayurveda advises individualized, structured routines, rest and recovery, reflection and self-awareness, sattva promoting lifestyle, alignment with dharma. So sustainable success requires rhythm, recovery, and meaning. And actually, this is not actually, binding us. It's actually not preventing us from achieving more. Actually, it is enhancing our capacity in the long run to be more productive and more efficient. So the key takeaways are that Ayurveda provides a multidimensional framework for health and leadership. Dharma connects personal well-being. Dharma is not a concept. Dharma is an experience. That feeling of interconnectedness, that feeling of harmony that we can nurture as we nurture health. So if we truly nurture health, we get that dharmic awareness. And then it is possible to have sustainable performance, and we can collectively create or transform the whole world into a manifestation of what was conceived as Arogya Samskriti. When health is integrated into culture, behavior, and institutions, we perform at our optimal level and we achieve the highest goals of life. So, leadership is most effective when rooted in inner stability and ethical clarity. So, what we have tried to highlight today in this short discussion is the focus on health oriented leadership. Modern leadership challenges require deeper models of resilience and purpose. Ayurveda offers a framework integrating body, mind, ethics, society, and environment. High performance and well being need not be opposing goals. A culture of health is essential for sustainable institutions and societies. So, when health is achieved, then we achieve dharma and also sustainable ways of living. So that's it. Dharma, health, leadership, and Arogya Samskriti. And I've shared the result of what we are doing at Amrita School of Ayurveda under Amrita Vishwavidyapitham through our Amrita IKS Center of Excellence, where we are trying to bring this Bharatiya narrative of Arogya Samskriti for empowering our society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rammanohar. This was a brilliant, brilliant presentation. Enjoyed every minute of it. I know I'm going to watch it several times this week, not to mention every week after. Let's move on. We have just a couple of minutes. I don't want to interrupt you while you're delivering a presentation. We have a couple of minutes left. I've got one or two questions that I'd love to pose to you. And this is more to do with, I think the framing you have brought in terms of the connection between dharma, health, and leadership. Very unusual. People don't tie those things together. But in your presentation, you've beautifully you've beautifully brought together how they all work together, how one supports the next, and so on. In from a particularly in the West, I should say, in the US, for instance, leadership is often associated with aggression, with speed, being visible all the time. Your presentation emphasizes sattva, clarity, steadiness, and restraint. How can leaders cultivate sattva in environments that reward the opposite qualities?
Yeah, it is a challenge. See, sattva is cultivated basically through a process of, self-reflection and moving inward, and that needs to be actually nurtured. So this also requires that we have a change in our value system, and this can happen very slowly. So I agree that it is not easy in the current environment which values aggression. We know that it's just like the yin yang in Chinese system. For convenience, I'm talking about the yin yang framework. And most of the time, this has been compared to the masculine and the feminine aspects of human nature, with the masculine being given overemphasis in terms of, achievement, aggression, outward
Mhm.
movement. So it's just like the two aspects of our brain. Our brain has two aspects, which in our culture we called as Ardhanarishwara. And it's all about balanced development of our personality. So what Ayurveda talks about is a complete unfoldment of your inner potential. There is a male in the female, there is a female in the male. And when both are balanced, so we are not saying that we don't need aggression, we don't need, but it is just that today we are overemphasizing one aspect of our nature. We can see that even women are expressing these qualities, of aggression. And so the whole culture has been focused on that. So we need to rediscover our human nature as a balance of these two opposing qualities. And that balance is what we call as sattva.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rammanohar. I know we are at the end of our hour. We're running a little bit over. Thank you so much. I've had a bunch of questions. We'll probably save them for the next time
Yeah.
we speak.
Yes,
Thank
I think
you.
I did, I didn't realize that I took a little longer than.
I'm glad. Let me state this for myself and everybody else. I'm glad you did.
Okay.
Uh, Today's discussion reminds us that apart from influence or achievement, leadership is also about sustaining balance, as you just said, within oneself, within institutions, and within society. And in fact, I would say this is a presentation that's perhaps also very meaningful to political leadership everywhere across the globe. On behalf of the Sanatan Dharma Group, we are grateful for your time, your guidance. Thank you to everyone who's joined us today. A recording of this call will be available within the next 48 hours. The topic of our next presentation is the decision that changes everything. Ram versus Ravan, to be delivered by Dr. Vishwanath Guha on June 11th at 7 a.m. PST, 7:30 p.m. IST. We look forward to continuing our exploration and learning with all of you. Namaste.
Namaste.